So the mask has slipped from the Biden regime, and I'm going to use the word regime. If you want to know why, you can check out one of our previous segments. That, in fact, you can't check it out on YouTube. You have to go watch it on our website. We'll link it in the show notes. But anyway, basically, I really do think that the US is descending into a kind of quasi-fascist regime, and I think that what's happened in the last week or so has really demonstrated it. Now, Jen Psaki did the infamous press conference on the 7th, I think it was. I can't remember the date exactly, but it was last week. And this was a fascinating press conference. Now, it was clips from Psaki herself that ended up going viral. But I think that what was important is actually the way it was being set up, because I watched the entire thing, unlike most people, I imagine. It had 11,000 views on the White House's 2 million YouTube subscriber account, because they're so popular. And this, I think, is important. So this is US Surgeon General Vivek Murthy. I'd never heard of him before, and he looks like he's come out of some sort of cloning device. The sort of like progressive media personality cloning situation where they all have the same kind of demeanor. They say the same things. They all agree with each other. There's no criticism amongst any of them because, why would there be? And they have this, slow talking way where they're, oh no, all truth lies with us, all falsehood lies with our enemies, and we're definitely not fascists. So let's play clip 1. Listen to the framing of this.
Right now, we are seeing COVID deaths markedly down from their peak in January. We have 160 million people who have been fully vaccinated, and hundreds of thousands of people each day are choosing to get vaccinated. That is all good news. But we are not out of the woods yet. Millions of Americans are still not protected against COVID-19, and we are seeing more infections among those who are unvaccinated. And that's why I want to talk to you today about one of the biggest obstacles that's preventing us from ending this pandemic. Today, I issued a Surgeon General's advisory on the dangers of health misinformation. Surgeon General advisories are reserved for urgent public health threats. And while those threats have often been related to what we eat, drink, and smoke, today we live in a world where misinformation poses an imminent and insidious threat to our nation's health. Health misinformation is false, inaccurate, or misleading information about health, according to the best evidence at the time. And while it often appears innocuous on social media apps, on retail sites, or search engines, the truth is that misinformation takes away our freedom to make informed decisions about our health and the health of our loved ones.
Isn't that subversive? You speaking on the internet about things we don't consider to be true at this moment is taking away your freedom. So using the language of freedom, subverting that, specifically using that, because they know that the word freedom is an important word to the Americans, to the people who's listening, but they're essentially saying that you not being censored is limiting your freedom. Terrifying, absolutely terrifying inversion of values there. But again, in the beginning, we've got 160 million Americans vaccinated, fully vaccinated, so that's double vaccinated, so that's half the population who have had their vaccines. Then the number of cases because of the Delta variant is obviously going up, but the Delta variant is basically a sniffle, and so that's not a great threat, and of course the number of deaths is down, as he says. So it seems that the COVID pandemic is actually well in hand because they've continued Trump's program of vaccinations, trying to get 1 million a day, although they fell short of the number of people that get vaccinated. And that's one of the impetuses for this. They seem to have a kind of totalizing view of vaccinations, even though all the numbers are totally in their favor. Everything's going very well, and they should be taking credit for this. Instead, they're mustering up more fear for some reason. And I think it's purely to do with their view that the government should have total control over all aspects of American society. Let's play the next clip.
We are saying we expect more from our technology companies. We're asking them to operate with greater transparency and accountability. We're asking them to monitor misinformation more closely. We're asking them to consistently take action against misinformation super spreaders on their platforms. We're also asking news organizations to proactively address the public's questions without inadvertently giving a platform to health misinformation that can harm their audiences.
So do as we say and don't let people contradict us. That's what they're asking. And we all know that governments just ask very politely, and if they get a no, they go, oh, well, okay, yeah, fair enough, your choice. That's how this works. You know that the Biden regime is going to be like that.
I just hate the idea of people in power using the term misinformation because it means whatever the people in power decide it means.
Exactly.
And then saying that we're going to, as the federal government, just ask politely. that
Exactly.
people shut down this misinformation. This can't be constitutional.
No, not well. I very much doubt it as well. But note the way that he. Oh, I was going to point something out very quickly there. That's right. When he said it was the best scientific information at the time. It's like, okay, because go back a year, Fauci saying masks don't work. Don't worry about masks. Okay, so Fauci was guilty of spreading medical misinformation. Oh, no, at the time that was fine. So what you've got is the groundwork to establish just a flowing narrative of whatever is convenient and whatever the science, as if that's a settled subject, as if they. And at one point he's like, oh, well, we've got loads of scientists who are agreeing with this. Like, yeah, but you've also got loads who disagree with you. You're not interested in hearing from them, are you? Of course. But so at any point, anyone who they can point to as an authority can say, sorry, the narrative has changed, and so everything has to change with it. And of course, then we arrive into 1984 territory, where it's always the present and never the past. The past never matters. It's always a constantly evolving present of what the government says is true at all times. And what the Jacinda...
If you don't agree, you get banned for life.
And if you don't agree, you get banned from all social media platforms, which we'll come to in a minute.
For life as well.
And for life. And
when the science changes, you don't come back.
Yeah, and this attitude was reflected in Jacinda, what's her name, in New Zealand? I can't remember her surname. But the weird tyrannical horse that's in charge of New Zealand literally came out and said, well, all of the truth you'll get is from us, and you should ignore any other source of information. It's like, can you imagine? Like, why would anyone be like, oh, well, the government's got my best interests at heart if they're saying literally all truth comes from the state? That's pure fascism. That is the apotheosis of what a fascist regime looks like. And for some reason, everyone in Australia and New Zealand's fine with it. For some reason, the Biden voters, assuming there are any, are fine with it. And so anyway, let's carry on. Next clip.
But the bottom line is all of us have an important role here to play. And technology companies have a particularly important role. We know that the dramatic increase in the speed and scale of spread of misinformation has in part been enabled by these platforms. So that's why in this advisory today, we are asking them to step up. We know they have taken some steps to address misinformation, but much, much more has to be done. And we can't wait longer for them to take aggressive action because it's costing people their lives.
Right. So there is the origin of the Joe Biden social media is killing people.
What a thing to say.
It's mad,
What a
isn't
thing for the US government to say. We've already presupposed that there are false information out there, and therefore it is up to private companies to do our bidding and censor it.
Yep. It's horrific.
For the US government to say that is just nuts.
The US government say, look, and essentially what they're saying is we want control of the press and social media, which, again, fascism, in order to counter misinformation, which is anything that disagrees with us.
Like, not promotion of a terrorist group, which you could claim is illegal. Misinformation isn't illegal.
No, and it's also, if there is any connection between misinformation and people dying, it's a very, very tenuous one, as many other steps along the way, with many other agents who are responsible for their own actions along that path. So just saying, well, it's absurd, and everyone can see that it's absurd, but the fact that they're ignoring the absurdity is, as Joseph Goebbels pointed out, just part of the program. But we'll get to all that in a minute. Let's go to Jen Psaki's carrying on with this.
With these social media platforms, and those engagements typically happen through members of our senior staff, but also members of our COVID-19 team. Given, as Dr. Murthy conveyed, this is a big issue of misinformation, specifically on the pandemic. In terms of actions, Alex, that we have taken, or we're working to take, I should say, from the federal government, we've increased disinformation research and tracking within the Surgeon General's office. We're flagging problematic posts for Facebook that spread disinformation. We're working with doctors and medical professionals to connect to connected medical experts with popular who are popular with their audiences with accurate information and boost trusted content. So we're helping get trusted content out there. We also created the COVID Community Corps to get factual information into the hands of local messengers. And we're also investing, as you all have seen, in the president's, the vice president's, and Dr. Fauci's time in meeting with.
So I should have got just the clip selections of Fauci contradicting himself one after another, because there are loads of these compilations out there. But the point is that there is no standard agreed upon factual analysis. There is just everything that has been said has been held. Fauci has held every position at every time, like at various different times. And so it's like the idea that the government can just act as if they're the source of truth, but then create an infrastructure that's going to create this sort of lattice above social media, where they're now patrolling social media to get Facebook to deplatform wrong thinkers, people who disagree with the state on this, even though the state has not exactly got a perfect track record.
It's not illegal speech.
It's
the government has no business going after it.
Absolutely not.
And the fact that they're then using Facebook as a puppet to do such a thing.
Exactly. The fact that they're using state power and taxpayer money to now tyrannize the American public for speaking their mind on Facebook. It's not wrong to be wrong on Facebook. You're allowed to be wrong on the internet. That's
should be.
Otherwise, oh my God, Biden's administration would have been deplatformed in the same way as Trump. Oh my God, they said something that would turn out not to be true.
Did you know Donald Trump was a Russian the whole time?
Exactly. Like the whole, and that, yeah, not even just talking about pandemic stuff. And the fact that this term misinformation is, of course, highly up for debate. It's not like this has sort of, definite content to the meaning of it. But anyway.
I mean, any party propaganda is banned at that point.
Yes, that's exactly what this is. And it gets worse.
Providing for Facebook or other platforms to measure and publicly share the impact of misinformation on their platform and the audience it's reaching. Also with the public, with all of you, to create robust enforcement strategies that bridge their properties and provide transparency about rules. You shouldn't be banned from one platform and not others for providing misinformation out there.
That's amazing.
That's awful.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's awful, but it's amazing in its awfulness, and I love watching the mask just come fully off. They don't distinguish between platforms. They see Silicon Valley as a cartel, which it is, and they expect all of them to act in the same way because they think of them as the same operation. That's why.
It's also an exposure of the fact that they have said previously, Silicon Valley and the Democrats, oh, no, they don't work together, just independent platforms with their own terms of service.
Which we know they're not.
And even the central part of the Democratic Party, the White House, their spokesperson for Biden, saying exactly, no, they're not.
Yes.
No. And they also do our bidding.
Yes. And we have state-run agencies and task forces that are on the lookout for Americans posting things we don't like. And in fact, they happen to, in fact, have a list of people that they want removed from social media. They didn't give us the full list. I only found out who one of them was. Don't know who else is on the government's list to be silenced from the public's domain. But one of them was Robert F. Kennedy Jr., because he is a prominent figure in the anti-vaccine movement. Now, they said they had 12 people. This is one of them. And so this is one of the people whom the CCDH said should be kicked off social media. His Facebook-owned Instagram page was shut down earlier this year for sharing COVID-19 misinformation, Facebook said. However, he's still allowed on Facebook himself, where he has more than 300,000 followers. This is what she's talking about. She's complaining that, and this is John F. Kennedy's nephew. They're complaining that he's not being removed from Facebook, even though he's been removed from Instagram.
You might as well replace that bit where Facebook have said something with the White House, shouldn't you?
You could, well, actually, Facebook actually had a surprisingly reasonable response to this.
But I mean, on the sense of this censorship just isn't coming from Facebook if they're being coerced by the state. Into
the US government is actively demanding that Silicon Valley deplatforms American citizens for saying things
misinformation
they don't like,
not illegal
they don't
speech.
agree with. Exactly, right? So Facebook actually had a very surprisingly reasonable response to this, saying, we don't automatically disable accounts across our apps because accounts may post different things on our different services. Fair? Very reasonable.
I imagine the White House won't be happy.
It's not going to last. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. They're not going to be happy. It's not going to last. But anyway, so the social media reaction to this was, of course, exactly what you'd expect from a group of people looking at what is broadly I won't even start saying things that might get us in trouble with YouTube because of their editorial policies. But anyway, it wasn't exactly good, and it was bipartisan. You had the Daily Beast's Noah Shachtman, who said, no, F no. which is good. And you've got a left-wing author saying, why is the White House declaring who should and shouldn't be banned from social media platforms? Google, Facebook, and Twitter are effectively state actors in disguise when they engage in political censorship. Correct. This is White House-directed collusion, radio host Clay Travis tweeted. When Psaki said, well, we don't take anything down, we don't block anything. Facebook and other private sector companies make decisions about what information should be on their platform, as if that's... Oh, yeah, the government's just pressuring you for something, but don't worry, they're totally independent.
This is their free will. We told them to do it, but it's totally their free will.
Exactly.
And if they disagree, we'll get rid of their privileges.
Yeah. But anyway, Stephen Miller, who's actually a really entertaining guy to follow on social media, said removing information on vaccines will translate right over to anything they think is misinformation on gun violence or climate or healthcare or what defines a man or a woman, which is why they're doing this. Completely correct. One Republican... Sorry.
I don't know if you were going to mention Trump's lawsuit as well.
I wasn't, actually.
He's currently doing a class action lawsuit against the US government on the basis that they use Twitter, Facebook, and whatnot, private companies, as a conduit for violating the First Amendment, which they wouldn't be able to do if it was a state organization. So they're just using them as a puppet to do it.
Precisely.
Exactly what he's alleging, and they're just like, yeah, we do.
Yeah. And it's not like there isn't more than enough evidence to suggest that Silicon Valley is highly partisan and deliberately coordinating with the Democrat Party.
The White House saying it,
Yeah,
I think, is good enough.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, but we had all of this before. Like, no one sat there going, maybe Silicon Valley is an instrument of the Republican Party. No one says that, but they're obviously an instrument of the Democrat Party. And now, since they're in power, they are an instrument of the White House. So the US government, again, the reason this is being called fascism is because, as Glenn Greenwald goes on to point out that we'll cover in a minute, the merger of state and corporate power under the direction of the state is, of course, the corporatization of fascism that is the hallmark of it. It's the core sort of philosophy on how things should be run. Where the communists do it out of necessity, the fascists do it out of desire. Anyway, so a Republican representative, Thomas Massey, said, from Kentucky, said, Psaki's statement makes it abundantly clear that they want people banned for simply disagreeing with the government's pre-approved narrative. Totally correct. And former GOP Congressman Joe Walsh, a fierce Trump critic who supported Biden, said it's not the government's job to moderate Facebook. Well, Jen Psaki and the Biden regime disagree. They think it is. And this was how the President of the United States described it to the public.
COVID misinformation. What's your message to platforms like Facebook?
They're killing people. I mean, look, the only pandemic we have is among the unvaccinated. And they're killing people.
Senile old man can barely remember his words. Oh, you can see him struggling with it at the front of his mind. But they're killing people. Facebook is murdering people. That's the result. Now, I personally think that if there's a murder on the loose, you should probably arrest them, lock them up. If there's, some sort of machinery that's run out of control, maybe you should shut that down. If there's just some sort of automated machine, like like an automated car or something that's deliberately running into pedestrians, you should probably disable that. But Facebook's not going to get disabled, even though it's killing people. Weird, isn't it? So we've got a platform that's killing people, and it's just going to remain there because, we can't do anything about that. No. If you actually thought it was killing people, you'd shut it down immediately, right? And if it was killing people, you'd be justified in shutting it down immediately. But you're not justified in doing that, and therefore you won't. You're going to just make sure they do exactly as you say instead. But anyway, so yeah, you get like this, New York Times, they're killing people. Biden isn't quite right, but he's not wrong. No, he is wrong. Facebook is not killing anyone. The coronavirus is killing people, sure. People's decisions kill them occasionally, but Facebook isn't doing that.
Like the man in the town square giving bad advice isn't killing anyone.
No.
He's giving bad advice.
No.
That's how that works.
Because believe it or not, the individuals who are making the decisions about their lives are actually responsible agents who are the ones who have personal responsibility for the decisions they make. Anyway, this is amazing, right? It was a stunning thing to say, even if it is in many ways true. In many ways. But not in that most core way of actually being factually accurate. The truth is, Facebook serves as a gateway to both misinformation and facts, presenting clearly solid information about COVID, as well as a place where an enormous flood of lies has overwhelmed the same zone and for a much longer time. You could blame individuals themselves for believing in lies, which is where it would be, or the responsibility would be, not doing due diligence and checking their facts. After all, deciding to forgo a vaccine is a personal choice, even if it's an unfortunate one. Well, I mean, it's not unfortunate for those people who've died of the vaccine, is it? Like, they're not like, well, fortunately I took the vaccine. Anyway, so they end with, is Facebook killing people then, since it provided the invention that allows all this to happen? Not exactly. Yeah, no, not exactly at all, right? It's like literally like saying Henry Ford is killing people by inventing the car. Well, there's car accidents every day. Henry Ford is responsible for all this. No, of course he's not. Of course he's not. That's ridiculous. But anyway, moving on, the New York Post rightly pointed out that this is tyrannical. This is literally tyrannical, quoting a Republican senator for Utah, saying the government can't censor speech. The First Amendment makes that very clear. A private for-profit corporation can make its own decisions, but when it's doing that in collusion with government, it starts to look to me like a First Amendment violation. No kidding. Because
in which case you should be able to sue the government if this was put in place. Like if the US government set up a censorship department that was the one enacting this stuff, you'd be able to sue them.
Yeah, because I mean this is tyrannical. Like preventing people from having access to the internet in what is essentially what's going on here is what tyrants do. As ABC News reported about Cuba, right? This is what Cuba's go-to tactic, cutting off the internet to prevent dissent, to suppress dissent. That's exactly what the Biden regime is saying to do in Silicon Valley, controlling 99% of conversation that happens on the internet, right? This is what they say. Restricting internet access has become a tried and true method of stifling dissent by authoritarian regimes around the world, alongside government-supported disinformation campaigns and propaganda. Wow, who's feeling personally attacked here, Psaki? On the extreme side, regimes like Cuba and North Korea, and the Americans, exert tight control over what regular citizens can access online. Elsewhere, service blockages are more limited, often cutting off common social platforms around elections and times of mass protests. There we go, you are part of the tyrannical regime that ABC News is complaining about.
I don't want anyone saying this BS narrative of well, in the US you can at least access a thing. In China you can also at least access anti-communist websites, but they will forcefully slow your internet down to make sure that most people don't bother. They are smart about their censorship in the East, and they're smart about it in Silicon Valley.
And remember that Joe Biden has spent more time with Xi Jinping than any other world leader, and he roundly praises his leadership style. Weird. Anyway, Facebook responded to this by saying, look, Biden's looking for scapegoats. Yes, because they set themselves an unrealistic vaccination target, failed to achieve it, and now they're looking for the culprits. A Facebook official said, in private exchanges, the Surgeon General has praised our work, including our efforts to inform people about COVID-19. They knew what we were doing. The White House is looking for scapegoats for missing their vaccine goals. And then we get to Glenn Greenwald's response, which, I mean, I couldn't co-sign on this more hard. And Glenn Greenwald, the last respectable leftist, practically, is doing the Lord's work here for personal freedom. Seriously, who the F is the White House to be dictating who should and should not be banned from social media platforms, to keep lists of who they think are the spreaders of misinformation, and then pressure companies they regulate to obey? Again, yeah, the government is the regulator of social media.
Everything Julian Assange released is misinformation.
Exactly.
Anyone who tweets it, banned.
Exactly. That's what Chris Cuomo. You shouldn't have these WikiLeaks things. Only we, the media, should have that. I'm sure you think that, Chris. This is pernicious S. Here's more of Psaki issuing decrees on who should and shouldn't be allowed the use of social media, then smugly scoffing at the notion that this should concern anyone on the ground, that we're going to die if we don't submit to the White House's orders. Day 2 of the American Civil Liberties Union's silence as the White House expands its boasting of the pressure it's placing on the tech companies it regulates to censor content it designates as misleading and to ban people on its lists, now insisting they be banned on all platforms. Again, why has the government got a list of wrong thinkers?
But also the ACLU practically supporting censorship at this point.
Exactly. Your silence. If you can't speak up, ACLU.
They took the intersectionality pill and have killed their own organisation because of it.
Absolutely. And again, fallen into line like the good serfs that they are. With the US government and Silicon Valley monopolies merging their power to control political speech, platforms devoted to resisting this authoritarianism and protecting free discourse become increasingly important. Substack is one, and so is Rumble. Another crucial point, you don't have to imagine or maybe speculate that the White House will start abusing this misinformation to claim to censor content that's politically damaging to them. They already did it with, of course, the Hunter Biden laptop. Dems and media tech monopolies censored the Biden archive based on the CIA lie. Then, when right before the 2020 election, Twitter banned all links to the New York Post, again, America's oldest newspaper. You couldn't get any more mainstream newspaper on this, and they've been completely consistent on the right side of all of these issues, unlike the New York Times. But anyway, so yes, the this was based on a CIA lie that they decided to censor your ability to read the New York Post article's expose, which was all factually accurate, about Hunter Biden's laptop, which was his and would have had election-changing information on.
And the Biden campaign did not even disagree that it was real.
No, they've never... like Hunter Biden desperately... Well, I mean, it might be my laptop. It could be. Yeah, we know it is.
They never said it wasn't.
Yeah. And who is it that... I can't remember if it was Bill Maher or something. Like, someone was like, yeah, okay, so look, I could believe that the Chinese might, like, Photoshop, like, M&Ms on Hunter Biden's dick, right? I could believe they'd do that. But 100 times? 100 photos? Do they need to do 100 photos of that? You know, it's like, yeah, exactly. You're like, this is obviously yours, Hunter. Anyway, so, and again, next one, someone replied to him, sorry, if we can go back to the previous one. Someone replied, I can't get over, Caitlin Johnston said, I can't get over how brazen the Biden administration is being and just announcing that it's their place to determine who should and shouldn't be banned on social media platforms. And there's how little backlash there is against this. Imagine if Trump had done this. And Glenn Greenwald's like, yeah, exactly. I'm not surprised that they did it. They seem to, I'd expect them to do it in secret. The fact that Jen Psaki is boasting about doing it shows she knows how pro-censorship are the liberal sector of corporate media and Biden voters. They love that the White House does this. But it's not going to stop there, right? It's not going to stop on social media, if you can believe it. The totalitarians don't just stop on one sector of society and then go, okay, our job's done. No, they're going to get phone carriers to vet anti-vax messages, right? So this was always the joke. Or would you expect your phone company to complain that you were saying things on the thing? Well, no, they do. They actually do. You know, they actually think this. So this is a Politico report about the DNC and other White House allies who want wireless carriers to scrutinize phone and social media messages for alleged misinformation. I guess we can just call it Jewish misinformation, since they've gone full Nazi at this point. Like, unironically, this is horrific. I can't believe this is being discussed in the United States of America. I could believe it was being discussed in New Zealand, because they're obviously a tyranny. Australia, obviously a tyranny. Us, obviously a tyranny. America? Hell, man. Unreal. This is unreal. If there's one way of showing the illegitimacy of the Biden regime, it's this. Anyway, this is in response to Charlie Kirk tweeting out, Biden is sending goons texting, sorry. Biden is sending goons door to door to make you take a COVID vaccine, sign a petition, say no to medical raids in America, which is practically once. I mean, it's a bit overstated, I suppose, but Biden is considering sending troops door to door to try and like get people to vaccinate. Not this one, John, if you've got the previous one. But anyway, Biden announced that on Tuesday that his administration would step up efforts to get Americans vaccinated against COVID-19 with a new program that would go door to door, literally knocking on doors. The government is going to send agents around to try and persuade you into getting a vaccine. It's like, well, that's going to look like intimidation, isn't it? Well, government agents just marching around going, you need your vaccine, you need your vaccine, you need your vaccine.
They're going to have to be armed government agents as well.
Well, of course they are. Of course they're going to be armed. But he said, we need to go community by community, neighborhood by neighborhood, and oftentimes door to door, literally knocking on doors to encourage vaccination. Yes, I love being coerced by the government. And this is because they missed their self-imposed goal of 70% of the nation's eligible people being vaccinated by July the 4th. Next is he's considering mandatory vaccinations for the military. That sounds great. There's one way to make the military on your side is by forcing them to have vaccines. He says, I don't know. I'm going to leave that to the military, but I'm not saying I won't. I think you're going to see more and more of them getting it. And I think it's going to be a tough call as to whether they should or should not be required to get it in the military, because you're in such close proximity with other military personnel, whether you're in a quarters where you're all sleeping or whether you're out on maneuvers. Yeah, but if you're in the military, you're probably quite fit and healthy and under like 50. So you're in no danger at all. And of course, they want continual COVID propaganda. Continual. NASCAR racing is going to be somewhere where they propagandize you about vaccination. So nothing within and nothing outside the state, nothing against the state. I can never remember Mussolini's formulation. But the point is, it's never going to go away. It's going to be every aspect of your life. And then you get, sorry, I know this is going on, but this has been so much, right? Biden fear-mongering about the enemy. Oh, the eternal enemy. We're facing the most significant test of our democracy at the moment. The Confederates back then never breached the Capitol as the insurrectionists did on July the 6th. I'm not saying this to alarm you. I'm saying this because you should be alarmed. And then he ends his speech with, we've got to act. Sounds like a fascist. It's just fascist fear-mongering. Unbelievable, right? And then the Guardian point out, at stake are the basic principles of democracy. Who gets to vote and how they exercise that right, and who gets to decide what vote counts. And then we got the famous clip of Biden basically quoting Stalin.
It's no longer just about who gets to vote or making it easier for eligible voters to vote. It's about who gets to count the vote. Who gets to count whether or not your vote counted at all. It's about...
Yeah, that's exactly right. It is about who gets to count the vote. And if the people in charge are going to count votes in the way they want them counted, then they're going to get the results they wanted, which is Stalin's point. But it's not that. It's not just Stalin or Xi Jinping or any other terrible dictator that Joe Biden cites. He's actually using Goebbels' the big lie. He says, this everything's a big lie. Everything's a big lie about the audits that are currently going on in the elections. And this is genuinely a Joseph Goebbels quote. It's not the traditional one that you'll see like going around on Facebook. I actually looked this up because I just want to be sure. According to, I think it was the Jewish Chronicle, they're like, no, we couldn't find any source on that. But there is a quote that goes like this from Goebbels. The English follow the principle that when one lies, one should lie big and stick to it. They keep up their lies even at the risk of looking ridiculous. Well, that's the Biden regime pointed exactly. And for some reason, though, as well, just on the end of this, and this struck me as really weird dictatory behavior, Jen Psaki is going to be the first person to throw a pitch at a baseball game. Why?
The White House press secretary.
Yeah, why? Such a bizarre thing for this regime to do. And anyway, so just to end up, I thought we'd just... I know...
Okay.
What a bizarre thing. Like, who wants Jen Psaki throwing a baseball?
Like, you pick the president or vice president. Why would
Well,
you
yeah,
like
like
the
he can
press
do it.
secretary, though?
Yeah, I know. Well, this is the point, isn't it? The point is it's an integrated, corporatized regime that is taking over the United States in exactly the same way that fascists take over a nation. But anyway, so if you wanted to know what Hunter Biden had done, we did a premium podcast about this. Josh did a great job of putting all this information together, so you can know exactly the kind of thing that Hunter Biden had been up to, as well as, of course, his connections to China and the amount of money that is being funneled to the Biden regime from the Chinese Communist Party. You can sign up on lotuses.com to check that out. It's well worth your time, and you're not going to get it from the mainstream media because they're the ones suppressing it. If you enjoyed this segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can watch the full broadcast live every weekday at 1 p.m. UK time on lotuseaters.com.